at the public session of the DHCW Digital Governance and Safety Committee meeting. And welcome to everyone. Prynhawn da. It's good to see you all on the screen. I'm pleased to welcome you all to the meeting today. And the more observant members of the committee will have noticed that I'm not Rowan Gardner. I hope that's not a shock, but I'm Alistair Neil, an independent board member for nearly 4 years, during which I've also been a member of the committee. With my first DGNS committee as chair, and I very much look forward to this and also to our subsequent meetings. I see the work of this committee as really vital in supporting the core aims and objectives of DHCW. And in the role that DHCW plays, it's extremely important for the Welsh Government and indeed for Wales itself. So no pressure then, anyone who's leading any of the reports today. But I just really emphasize, I think the work that you do, that we do at the committee is really important. And just as we move into the agenda proper, I'd underline that the expectation is that members of the committee have already familiarized themselves with the report. So colleagues who are presenting reports will be asked to highlight the key points rather than taking us through word for word of the reports. Thank you for that. And in the interest of time, rather than asking all committee members and those in attendance to introduce themselves now, and if I've not already done so prior to the reports, I'd ask members to introduce themselves as they present an item or ask a question or indeed make a comment. Diolch. So on to apologies. I've received apologies from Rydian Hurl, the Executive Medical Director, and Rachel Powell, Associate Director of Information, Intelligence and Research, is attending in his place. And I see Rachel holding your hand up. Sometimes it's difficult to spot in the sunlight, Rachel, but you're wearing a very noticeable color, which is going to make it much more easy. Thank you for that. I also admire the length of your job title, and count our blessings. We no longer have business cards because they would need to sometimes be even lengthened with some of our job titles. You cover a lot of important areas. Also, apologies from Darren Lloyd, the Associate Director for Information Governance and Patient Safety. For him, John Sweeney, Integration Sharing and Information Governance Manager, will deputise. Welcome to John too. And apologies also from Carwyn Lloyd-Jones, the Chief Cloud Officer. Please note that there will be a private session, as is normal at the end of this meeting, where discussion on matters that are seen not appropriate for the public domain will be held. A summary of these discussions will be reported to the next public session of the committee via the abridged minutes. And the committee papers and minutes have been uploaded to the DHCW website for members of the public to access. This meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on the DHCW website for members of the public and stakeholders to access. There will be a short 10-minute comfort break at 10 past 2, and finally, the public part of the committee is scheduled to run until 10 past 3, with the private session beginning at 20 past 3 after a 10-minute break. That sounds like the sort of train timetable of Great Western Railways, but unlike Great Western Railways, if we are running a little bit ahead, that's absolutely fine. If we're running a little bit over, that's fine too, but I'm going to try and contain their enthusiasm to talk for too long and see if we can bring the meeting in within those timescales. Okay, so we're going to move on to item 1.3, which is declarations of interest. And just to ask, are there any declarations of interest to make the committee aware of? I haven't received any, and I see none on the screen, so we'll move on to item 1.4, which is matters arising. And we'll do that ahead of the consent agenda. So has anyone any additional matters to bring to the attention of the committee before we start part 2 of the meeting, which is the consent agenda? I see no hands raised or no information on that. So we are going to move on. The consent agenda items were circulated prior to the meeting. So for the purpose of the minutes, I'd like to confirm that the committee approve the minutes. Are there any changes or corrections that any colleagues have got to offer? I see none, and so I'll take that as approval of the committee meetings minutes. And moving on to the forward work plan. At 2.2, the committee is asked to note the forward work plan. If there are indeed any points that any colleagues have got to raise that they'd like to see on the forward work plan, please do get in touch with me or in touch with Chris, and we'd be only too pleased to look at bringing them forward. Moving on to 2.3, consultation and document approval reports. The DHCW Artificial Intelligence Strategy is being presented for approval, having been through consultation and internal endorsement already. So I'm asking the committee to approve the DHCW Artificial Intelligence Strategy. And indeed, we'll come back to referencing this particular strategy later in the main agenda. We're going to move on to the third part of the agenda, the main agenda, the action log. And there are 3 actions on the log, 2 of which are closed and 1 is underway. So we're going to move through onto the corporate risk register at 3.2 to include the annual corporate risk trending analysis. And I'm going to hand over to Chris Darling, the Director of Corporate Affairs and Board Secretary, to lead us through the key points, Chris, of the report, if you would, and we'll have some discussion after that on the risks assigned to the committee. 3 of these are documented for this public session. I'd add that there are 2 further risks classified as private and which will, as normal, be taken in the private session after this meeting. So over to you, Chris, as Gwelwch yn da, and I'll hand over to you.
Diolch, Chair. Thank you very much. Yeah, so just to confirm, there's 15 public risks on the corporate risk register. The full risk register is included within the papers today. I am going to focus on the 5 that are assigned to this committee for oversight and scrutiny. As you mentioned, Alistair, there are some assigned to the private session, so I'm not going to touch on those, but obviously we will cover those in detail when we get into the private session. There's 2 corporate risks which committee members will be aware of, but I will ask John Sweeney to give us an update in terms of the mitigation and the work that we're doing to try and address the risks. Those 2 are 0263 DHEW functions and 0320 the citizen and stakeholder trust in the use of health and care data. The third public risk, before I hand over to John, is 0300, which is the CANIS screening and palliative care risk. So I'll hand over to John, if that's okay, to start with for the 2 information governance risks, and then I'll give an update on the CANIS position. John?
Thanks, Chris. So if I take those 2 risks together, the DHEW functions and citizen and stakeholder trust, we escalated these risks to DHEW's corporate risk register because they do impact on DHEW's ability to deliver its strategic aims and objectives, albeit responsibility for mitigating the risks sits with Welsh Government. In terms of DHEW's role in mitigation, we are engaged with Welsh Government through various channels, including directly with the relevant policy team and through a data use and sharing working group, which is sponsored by the Chief Medical Officer. So supporting Welsh Government's policy development was a specific request in DHEW's most recent remit letter, but we don't yet have details of the specific requirements or our deliverables. So in summary, while responsibility sits with Welsh Government, we continue to seek avenues to influence and support. I think that's it from me, Chris.
Thank you, John. Alistair, do you want to take questions on these now? Is that okay?
That's great. Yeah, thank you. And thanks, John. Thanks, Chris, for highlighting these particular issues. And any particular questions or comments from the committee. I see David with your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. Thanks, John, Chris. Just around the data sharing agreement, it says in the notes that we've now got a joint data controller agreement in place, but that it's permissive. I just wondered if you can expand a little bit on what permissive means in this context. And are we now seeing more data flow into the NDR as a result of this agreement, or are the discussions that you alluded to still needed to unblock that flow of data?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So just to clarify, yes, that joint control agreement relates specifically to NDR services. So for any data in the what we call the CDR or the NDAP spaces. In terms of data flow, I think it's fair to say that there is more work needed and to establish exactly what arrangements need to sit underneath that joint control agreement to allow data to flow, so that the risks and the associated mitigations still do need to be addressed to essentially unblock data flows across the health and care system in Wales. Okay,
so just play back what I think I've understood. So we've got an agreement in place, but we're still not seeing the regular flow of data into the CDR part of the National Data Resource.
There are some flows of data that have started into the CDR, but I think if we want to move towards a whole system view of data, a comprehensive view of the patient record, using the NDR as the technical solution, I think it's fair to say that there needs to be further work on DHEW's functions and the whole patient engagement and trust, particularly around primary care data. I think it's fair to say, because it can be a contentious area, quite a sensitive matter. So those risks are still relevant and yeah.
Okay, so in summary, we've made some progress, but there's still a fair bit we have to do in this space.
Yes.
Okay, lovely. Thanks, John.
Thanks, David. And it's interesting, John, isn't it, that you could probably stand back and say that as much as we can present this as a corporate risk, it's also a big corporate opportunity for us to be able to develop the data flows and actually, obviously, meet some of our core objectives in doing so. But the benefits of the core work as an opportunity are very real too.
Yes, I'd agree with that. There certainly is an opportunity. Yeah, and as I said in the update, I think we do continue to look for every avenue we can explore to raise the profile of this issue and to help influence and support. We are seeking. But yeah, I would agree there is an opportunity.
I also just wondered, John, in terms of looking at those risks, is there anything particularly new, or are we simply capturing as a risk some, really what has been with us for quite some time?
They do reflect these risks have been known for some time, so there isn't anything particularly new. I would say there's some new avenues opened up to explore how we might influence policy decisions through that chief medical officers group that I mentioned, but the fundamentally the risks have been around for some time.
Yeah, it's helpful, I think, just for context that we and anyone tuning into this understands that too, coming from you. So that's really helpful. Good, thank you. I don't see any other hands up with points or questions, so we'll move on. Did you want to cover 0300, Chris?
Yes, thank you, Alistair. And just to comment on that, I do think the CMO group and that drive is a helpful kind of additional route to look at addressing this, and it's given some impetus. And your point on the opportunity, David, I think seeing the data flowing in as a strategic asset to DHEW, but also the wider system, it is a huge opportunity. And I think that is, and I know David would say that's where the value will come from. So continuing to treat it as a strategic asset is really important to us. So yes, the third risk I wanted to touch on, which was 0300, which you'll see from the risk score has been mitigated right down to a low risk score of 6. But the executive medical director, who's the exec lead for this risk, wants it to remain on the corporate risk register. I mean, it has been on for a long time until the system isn't being used at all. And it's fair to say there's still a handful of users that used it, and that was the case during the last month. So during April, there was a handful of users, and there were two predominant reasons for its use. One was getting historical radiology data for some patients relating to treatment plans for 2 or 3 months to inform future treatment plans. And the second one was around subject access requests or coroner's reports. So the team are working on options to ensure access can be continued, but the system ideally is completely decommissioned. Whilst users are accessing the system, there is a small risk still because it's because of the age of the software. So Sam might want to comment on that, but I think the risk is gone from a place where it was high risk in terms of the number of users using it on a daily basis to now a handful of users for very specific points and reasons. So the risk score reflects that, but as Ridian's not here, I did want to just say it's continuing to stay on the risk register until there's a full decommissioning of its use and an alternative approach. And I can see Sam has his hand up and David, so I'll pause there.
Yeah, so Sam, if you could pick up there first of all, and then we'll bring in David.
Yeah, thanks, Alistair, and thanks, Chris. So just to add to what Chris has said, so the functionality that CANISC was previously performing has now been absorbed into WCP. So we've built the cancer informatics capabilities into the Welsh Clinical Portal now. So that's being taken forward as a live product and developed in the normal way. We've got a core team on that as well. So that's we've secured the future of that as a product. So for the reasons that Chris has described, there are a few people who still need to have access to the legacy data that still sits within CANISC. So I believe I'm right in saying that the system is now read-only. If it isn't yet, it soon will be. It is. I've just had confirmation from one of my team. But the plan is that we'll be taking the data out of CANISC and putting it somewhere else. So it's going to be just accessible as a kind of offline data set, which will enable the CANISC system, which is running on legacy technology, to then be decommissioned completely. And at that point, the risk will be fully mitigated.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sam. And David, I think you have a question.
Yeah, thanks. So Sam, sorry, I'll swap the questions around. I was going to ask a different question. What's the timeline on what you've just said in terms of moving the data to somewhere where we can be sure of accessing it, so it's not on the legacy kind of system?
Yeah, I don't think we have a confirmed time frame for that at the moment, David. Okay. And I'm conscious it's been, that's been the plan for some time, so I'm keen to get one as well. But I don't think we have the time frame as we speak today.
Okay, fine. That triggers my next question, because depending on what you said there, I might have not asked it. But Chris, I understand why Ridian is cautious about this, and I've been on this committee since it started, and it was one of the first concerns I had as a committee member. But I do feel we've now got to a place where the risk that we had when we started this has significantly diminished, and that we have got a process of de-escalating the risk from a corporate risk and managing it at a sort of leadership level. So I have a suspicion we might be at that point now. So can we just go back to Ridian and just check that he's not being overcautious on this?
Yeah, thanks, David. Happy to pick that up. And if it helps, I can pick that up alongside working with Sam and others to get a timeline. So that, okay, with the two, that might, might give you sufficient.
Yeah, if Sam says within 3 months, I'm happy to leave it where it is. But if it's to end of the year or later before we get to that place, then I think it's something we should be managing locally rather than elevating to this committee.
Thanks, David. I'll pick that up with Ridian.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, David. I was going to make the same observation, and it is a discipline that I think it's well worth us following through. It's a bit like weeding, isn't it? It's important to sort of pull them out if they're if they're not really going to serve any particular purpose there. But obviously, we don't want to put an inappropriate pressure on Ridian in that. Okay, good. Thank you very much indeed, and thanks for taking us through that. So, any other points then that you wanted to flag up, Chris or John, in the report?
Not from my perspective, Chair. It's just to note those risks, and obviously we'll cover the private risks in the session to follow. Thank you.
Brilliant, Doc. And thanks, Chris and John, and thanks for the additional constructive comments. So we will move on to the part 4, which is the assurance agenda. And I'm going to ask Keith Reeves, the Service Management Team Manager for Assurance, to take us through this report, which is for the committee to note for assurance. Keith.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this is for the report for the Incident Review and Learning Group, or the Incident Review and Organisational Learning Group. This is a combination of Q4 and also just a general reflection over the course of the year. So the group itself has now entered its 6th year of running. And I think throughout the year, we've sort of tried to reflect more on the effectiveness of the group, and also the focus more on not just expanding on the reviews, but also taking the learning from that and feeding into improvements. So a lot of the work that we've done this year has meant that we're now looking more in at some of the key programs that we've been implementing through DHEW. Also looking more at the thematic reviews, and I'll go through sort of section by section just on some of the highlights. So the report's been circulated prior to this meeting, and I think a couple of things to note. So on the reporting side, where we have early warning notifications and national reportable incidents, there's been a little bit of a focus around the complaints, concerns and feedback, with a review of the feedback we've had in relation to the dental access portal. And I know this was picked up at the last meeting as well. So we've undertaken a slight review of this. There is some ongoing stuff so that we can tie it in with the types of incidents and types of calls that we're getting into our service desk, but primarily the issues that are arising have been around the appointments and dental allocations, and also the logging and the one-time passwords. And what we've identified from this has meant that we've been able to put some improvements into the system itself, primarily around the one-time passwords element. And that was part of a release that's come out in March. So we'll now be doing a follow-up review to that for to identify whether that's actually improved on everything, hopefully with a reduction in the number of calls in relation to that. On the review front, as I've said, it's given us a chance over the course of the year to identify or to bring in additional learning from the sort of non-incident side, the non-technical review side. So we've had an increase in the number of program lessons learned, and also some other reviews that that have been undertaken. So this includes things like audits, and for Q4 the quality team presented on the Kaizen events that they've been running, which is an approach we've been taking around analysing working practices to identify where we can be more efficient in how we undertake those. That's given us a better indication on the types of learning that we've been able to identify from that. And so in total across the year, we've undertaken 22 different reports and presentations. This is down on previous years, but then the complexity of those reviews has meant that we've actually improved on identifying some of that learning. On that learning front, within the report itself, There's 4 examples of the types of reviews that we've been receiving. So for Q4, we had the NHS Wales app, and this was a good review because it actually focused more on the agile delivery approach, and how, as an organisation, we're able to approach agile in a way, but then also reflecting on that to ensure that it must still remain balanced with our planning cycle. Through in Q3, we had the thematic review around the incidents caused by change, and in Q2, there was another NHS Wales app review of an incident caused by change itself. So it's sort of, we're going through a bit of a cycle of going, okay, we've had an incident, it was caused by change, we then looked at the change, and then from that we've then gone, okay, well, is our change approach appropriate, and if so, how do we bring in things like agile working? And then we've also looked at the contributory factors, and part of this was also, we've noticed a general reduction over the course of the year compared to previous years. And so some of the improvements that we've put in place has meant that we've actually had a reduction in the number of incidents that we've been assessing, which has then led to a drop in the different contributory factors. And then finally, just on the improvement side, we started the year with quite a number of improvements. As we've adopted the operating models across the organisation, those improvements are starting to sort of take root, and they're starting to lead in on how we can actually improve in our working practices. So we've completed improvements around major incident management, and there's continual work that's going to be undertaken on that. With the advent of the new ITSM tool that's coming this year, it's given us a chance to reflect on the training out of the ITSM processes, but also we've made improvements around the relationships with the health boards and the NHS Wales orgs, and also with our suppliers. So I think it's been a very busy year, and I think there's more improvement coming within 2026-27. So in April, we've undertaken an effectiveness review of where we are now compared to where we were previously, and that will come through the Q1 report. And also, is the incident review and learning group still an appropriate mechanism for learning? And if so, then that's brilliant. But what can we do to move forward? And there's talk about potentially splitting out some of the agenda items so that we have an area which is more reflection on the learning, but also then the outcomes from that learning. So how do we take that forward into further improvements? I think that's everything that I want to cover off in this report. So any questions?
Thank you, Keith. And David, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. Thanks, Keith. Keith, I just wanted to dig a little bit into the lessons learned exercise you did on the NHS Wales app. In terms of the delivery and planning, I'd fully support the action that you came up with, which is to do discovery first. That for me is a no-brainer. So I'm glad to see you've done that one. In that exercise, we had a bit of an issue going live with the waiting list functionality on the app because of a different IT system we encountered in Cardiff and Vale. As part of lessons learned, did we dig into that, and there was anything that we pulled out of that we would do on similar things going forward?
So my understanding, because this was actually undertaken by the programme, so we haven't as yet. So it came. I mean, this one came in the March report, so we haven't necessarily followed that up yet with the issues within Cardiff and Vale, but it is one that we're taking away.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I didn't realise you weren't involved in review.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have posed the question in your direction. The thing I was trying to get at really was we're having to integrate with a fragmented estate across the NHS in Wales, and I just wondered if there was something that we picked up in the review that would at least be aware of that problem going forward and incorporate that in our planning. But I can always pick that one up with Sam. So thanks for the offer.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
And just on that, if I may, John, before bringing Chris and then Sam in, just following up with David, in terms of the learning that comes out of whatever issues relate to the NHS Wales Act, presumably other parts of the United Kingdom have also had all sorts of learning in their own parts of the kingdom, be it England, be it Scotland or Northern Ireland. And I just wonder whether or not we're engaged with colleagues in other parts of the NHS within the United Kingdom to just see whether or not we can avoid any elephant traps or problems, as well as potentially understand the best learning coming out of them.
So from a program perspective, yes, they've been because we've got very, very close ties with NHS England and primarily around the NHS login. I know that the program have been working very, very closely with them to also identify the learning from that. And we've done that. So we've done similar with similar sort of programs where there is that close working relationship. For NHS Scotland and for Northern Ireland, personally, I'm unsure. But that's, again, it's something I can follow up with the program. But I think it's going to be very, very similar, that where we've got that close relationship in sort of similar program areas, then we would have identified that. And it'll be one that I'll pick up with Michelle Sell on that front, unless others have experienced anything similar.
Yeah, I think, Keith, that's exactly, you make the point very well, that the mutual learning can sometimes be really helpful and more powerful. And that, if we're all going down a similar path, there probably is a lot of common learning. So it's good to hear that you're looking at that. Thank you. Chris, I see you with your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's a couple of things, Keith. A really helpful report. One comment you made around balancing agile delivery approach with the planning cycle that we have in NHS Wales. I just wondered, because as an organisation we're unique, aren't we, in the NHS Wales system, where we kind of have the NHS clinical aspect, but also the digital aspect. So the drive to an agile approach from a digital perspective, but also working within that planning framework around service design. So I just wondered if you could expand on that learning and how that was it that you found they did mesh together, the agile and the planning, or was it a tension that needed work?
So with the review that came through, I think it was very much more of finding that balancing act. I think as an organisation, we approach development in a number of different ways. So we have the agile way, but then there are some solutions that are still using the old the old waterfall method. It's more the traditional waterfall method. And with agile, it's not that there's less focus on the governance and the planning structure. It is about identifying the most appropriate level, and I think that's really where the program we're coming from. It's, yes, we can develop at speed and we can develop agile, but it is also that we still have to take into consideration that as an NHS Wales organisation, we still have that duty of care. We've still got to do the planning side to ensure that it's appropriate, not just for the organisation, but also for the patient and the public in this instance.
Thanks, Keith. And one more, if it's okay, just on the ITSM tool and the extent to which you think that's an opportunity for us as an organisation.
Yeah. So with the new tool, what it allows us to do is to review not just our support processes, but also the way that we develop, the way that we roll out and deploy. The new tool has a lot more functionality than the current solution that we've got, and what it will allow us to do is a lot more automation, a lot more use of AI, and generally deliver some more efficiencies than we've probably been able to undertake in the past. Because it's now based around sort of modern methodologies. It's based around modern technology, and the program itself, of having now had a chance to sort of have a look at it from in a sandbox environment, I can see that it's going to make a lot of efficiencies in our ways of working.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Keith. Thanks for the question there, Chris. And on to Sam Lloyd.
Thanks, Alistair, and thanks, Keith. I just wanted to reflect that actually it's really good to see the improvements coming through that Keith highlighted in that report. You know, if we think we're getting better in some areas as an organisation, we need to have the empirical data to back that up, and we're starting to get some of that in some areas. So, and I'm aware of the really good work that's being done on major incident management. We're looking to establish a MIM, or major incident management team, which should be in place from the 1st of June. And they'll be putting a lot of additional discipline around how major incidents are managed and making sure that we've got consistent documentation and processes and structures and so on. The lessons learned, you know, the extent to which we're doing that in a much more structured way, I think is starting to bear fruit. So I just want to say thanks to Keith and the team for that. But there's a lot more opportunity, I think, as well. We've still got improvements to make in terms of national responses to major incidents, I think, and how we coordinate across organisations. We saw that during the recent public sector broadband aggregation network outage that we had. There's still a lot we can learn as a system about how we need to coordinate, where there's this kind of multi-agency impact that we need to assess. And as Keith has mentioned, the ITSM tool, when we implement that, I think is a really big opportunity to automate and increase efficiencies and so on. So we're on a good trajectory, but there's more to do.
Yeah, well said, Sam. Thank you. You know, I also really like seeing trajectories rather than just pure data. If there are indeed trajectories that can point to particular conclusions, so I think it's very helpful to get the perspective of if the number of notifications, for example, are reducing. I think it's important we say it, and Sam, you captured that point well. So really good. One thought and real question you significantly answered, John. To what extent are we able to say that this is shared learning as opposed to learning? To what extent are we actually, you know, sharing it and making, you know, clearly at this committee we are, but beyond that, how would we justify using the terminology of shared learning?
So it is something that we've sort of, I want to say, battled with as a group about how best we sort of promote that learning so that it's not just within group. So people taking away the outcomes from the individual sort of meetings. We do have comms team on board. They're part of that group, so we're always looking at ways that we can actually promote that through the likes of 10 Talks and other things. So I think the way that we evidence it then is the reduction in sort of the repeat incidents, the general improvements around delivery, and I think it's one of those things that it will come up time and time again, that we do need to look at the effectiveness of the group pretty much every quarter. We look at it, plus the annual review, so that it's then how we then deliver more improvements, and that's part of the conversation that we're having at the moment.
Thanks, Keith. That is helpful. And just a quick one, Chris, before we move on.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. You triggered a thought though on the shared learning, because DHW work through collaboration, so the shared element of the learning is critical, isn't it? And in improvement 7, the health board relationship management, and improvement 8 in the report, the supplier management, without that shared learning from a supplier perspective, from a health board perspective, we can only go so far. So it's just really to say, I think it's something to just think about actually in terms of the next phase of the group moving forward.
Yeah, no, I completely agree on that one.
Yeah, sometimes it's I'm not suggesting this is what we're doing at all, Keith, but sometimes it's we can become used to the embedded language, and shared learning can in some places reflect more about localized learning if we don't just challenge ourselves internally. But it sounds like we very much are doing that, so that's good to hear. Great, so thank you, Doc, Keith, for that, and the incident review and organizational learning report is for the committee to note. And we move on to item number 4.2, which is the Information Governance Assurance Report. And I'm going to ask John Sweeney, the Information Sharing and Integration Governance Manager, to take us through this. Escola Candar.
Thank you, Chair. If I focus on a few highlights from the report and appendices. So Appendix A includes details of requests for information made to DHCW, which include details of requests under the Freedom of Information Act, or FOI requests as we call them. So the upward trend in the number of FOI requests to DHCW does continue. That is not just a DHCW issue, it's a general trend across public services. So for example, central government bodies saw a 14% increase in 2025, which is on top of an 18% increase in 2024. If I move on to Appendix B, that includes details of the data protection impact assessments the team has worked on during the reporting period. So we worked on 27. We started 8 new DPIAs, as we call them, and we approved 10 DPIAs. And typically these are to provide assurance for national projects and programs. So it's just to highlight the volume of range of DPIAs that we work on reflects the variety of work the HCW is involved in. Also, in Appendix B includes the volumes of requests made to the IG team via a system we have called Action Point, which is how we record and manage requests from stakeholders, internal and external. So we dealt with over 1,600 requests, or calls as we refer to them, in March, compared to just under 1,200 in February. And that reflects really the deadline for the submission of a Welsh IG toolkit, information governance toolkit, and the requests we get for assistance from primary care contractors as they seek assistance to make sure they meet the minimum expected standard of compliance. So it's just to highlight that increase there. Appendix C highlights activity on what we refer to as national data policy. I've already mentioned the Chief Medical Officer sponsored group, which is the data use and sharing group. Its first meeting was on the 24th of April. The group was chaired by the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, and its aim is to unlock progress on data use and sharing issues that have historically been challenging. DHCW's Executive Medical Director and some other DHCW colleagues attended that meeting. Just to turn to the main body of the report, it refers to an action plan related to the implementation of Data Use and Access Act, which is now being implemented. The implications aren't really significant for DHCW, but we've mapped out and planned the actions we do need to take there along the lines of minor amendments to templates and some references we have to the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, which will be changing its name in due course. So just those highlights I wanted to point out, Chair.
Thank you, Doc John. And this is such an important area for a number of reasons. It's also one that is probably more, certainly as much a target of potential hackers or cyber attacks, given the importance of the data that we potentially manage. So, David, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. Thanks, John. John, I just wanted to dig into the last thing you covered a little bit more, which was this new group that's been formed around data use and sharing. It says in the report it's short term. Just wondered what short term was in terms of likely timeline. I see it as a really useful group in allowing sharing where it's appropriate for the benefit of the patient or somebody in care. I just wondered a little bit about the role we've got in that as well. Is it within Ridian's area, or is I'm assuming the IG group, which comes under Ridian, is also involved? Can you just unpack that a little bit for me?
Yeah, sure. So my understanding is that it is set up with a defined lifespan, I suppose, the group, and the focus is on identifying use cases, sort of clinically led use cases. So it does. Ridian attended the first meeting as our executive medical director, supported by Darren as our associate director for IG and patient safety, and some other colleagues, I think, on the data side of things. So I believe it in terms of timescales. I can't recall what the timescale is. I think it is between sort of 12 and 18 months to really identify some use cases and give advice to the system on how we can unblock them. Chris may come in, he may have some further information.
Chris,
Sorry.
I think you're coming in.
Yeah, but my hand wasn't actually relating to that. But
While you've got the hand up, then Chris, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it was separate. So David, if you're happy with that, but I can follow up on that, David, with Ridian for you.
If you would, thanks.
Yeah, I will do. It was a question, Alistair, on the Freedom of Information Act requests and responses. Just obviously Q4 for us saw a fairly significant increase in the numbers. So it was just a question to John on, the confidence within the team, the capacity that the team have. If those numbers continue, are we able to? Is he confident we're able to respond within the timelines? Because obviously it's a statutory responsibility, isn't it? The time frames involved. Any concerns? I just wanted to ask.
There are some concerns, I suppose concerns. We're mindful of the increase in numbers, and as you said, Chris, that it is a statutory responsibility. The ICO is quite active in monitoring public authorities' response times, and they do from time to time take action against public authorities where their response times are what they would say is poor, below expected levels. So we are mindful of that demand. I know Darren has been working with another colleague of mine on a paper to put to management board, I believe, around resourcing to make sure we are sort of considering those capacity issues. But I suppose it's a reassurance that we are considering those issues and how we can ensure we have the right capacity in place. I mean, there's various reasons for the increases, which don't necessarily need to go into. I guess that's different matter, but yeah, we are mindful of it.
Thanks, John, Doc, and Chris. David, I see. Did you want to follow up on that particular point?
No, I wanted to get back to my original point. John was talking about it. I had a supplementary thought, which was I see this as a positive development. Don't get me wrong. We have got the WASPI framework, which has been in existence for 20 years or so now, which is great. John, you might not be able to answer this, but I'll ask the question. My sort of reading is that this potentially may extend the scope of what we're allowed to do under WASPI, or am I just reading between the lines and not? That's what I'm hoping. But have you got any view as to whether this would extend the scope of WASPI or how it relates?
So WASPI is, as you know, I'm probably telling things you already know, an information sharing framework, which includes a focus on sort of standardized templates to help organizations, and it's cross public sector, not just health and social care. So there's a focus on education. So it's bringing together those, it is providing a mechanism and tools that public service providers on the sort of front line can use to break down one of the barriers to information sharing, which is what should information sharing agreements look like. That was the fundamental purpose of WASPI. I suppose the focus of the group we mentioned, the Chief Medical Officer sponsored group, is to really look at those health and social care use cases and to try and maybe provide some clarity on. There's often concerns that we'd be breaching confidentiality by sharing information. For example, I think it's really to dig into those specific use cases and understand. So they are to. I mean, WASPI can help to some extent because it does provide those templates that can help organisations once they've established that they can lawfully share information. I think the group is more about, well, can they lawfully share information in the first place, and can we dispel some myths in that area? And if that helps at all.
It does. Thanks. I'll watch this space with interest going forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, John. And just to finish on this one, John, the nature of IG, as I was just highlighting earlier, in terms of its role in managing information about patients and staff, and the importance of how our reputation is linked to this. And this might be something Sam Lloyd would comment on, but there's the million and one developments of AI, really do change the world. And I did wonder, in connection with the role we have of managing, data and the reputational risks, the extent to which you are considering, wargaming, considering how it might impact, just as much, in links with potential cyber attacks, so that, it's not IG cannot just function on its own, hermetically sealed sort of environment. Obviously, it works within the real world. So I just wondered if there are any changes or developments there that you're considering, John.
I think if we think in general terms, I suppose processing personal data by whatever means, the same sort of legal considerations apply. So still looking at the UK GDPR and data protection legislation, there's some additional risks, I suppose, in terms of the transparency bit. Do we understand how it works, and can we explain to the public how things work so we can meet those transparency requirements, but also in terms of that data loss prevention. So I think it is fair to say AI has sort of increased the risk in some areas. In terms of what we are doing across DHEW, we do have some work in the AI space, but I think Sam may be coming in to rescue me on that one.
Sam, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to add that I think a lot of organisations are seeing an increased volume of FOI requests and other sorts of, subject access requests and those sort of things, which are FOI generated. We've seen a significant increase ourselves, as we discussed earlier. Not sure whether that's AI generated or not, but I saw at the end of last week that the ICO has just published some guidance on how organisations can deal with AI generated FOI requests. I'm not fully familiar with what it says yet, but I think it's helpful that the regulatory bodies are starting to recognise that this is a risk for organisations. And in the cybersecurity space as well, it's very similar. We've just had this Mythos thing that's being released or is about to be released, which is potentially changing the whole landscape of cybersecurity in terms of how quickly it is, how easy it is for threats to be detected, and how organisations are going to have to step up their responsiveness to be able to address them. That's going to be a significant challenge, I think, over the next few years.
Yeah, it's well said, Sam. And I'm really just raising it because in some ways IG has become almost a traditional area of organizations to manage in traditional ways, if that's the right expression. And it just seems like the changes that we're seeing in the world around us, they probably represent significant challenge to some of those more normal approaches from the past that require us to think afresh. But very helpful. Thank you very much. And I see no more hands up or questions raised. So it's just to note for the committee that we are being asked to note this report for assurance. So Diolch, John, and we move on to item 4.3, which is the Information Services Assurance Report. And I'll hand over to Rachel Powell, the Associate Director of Information Intelligence and Research, to take us through the key points of this report. Rachel, is gwelwch yn dda.
Thank you. Afternoon, everyone. So I'll just take some key points from the report. So I understand you'll have had the papers and hopefully read the detail in advance of the meeting.
Indeed, so.
So since February, the ISD Assurance has reviewed 6 assurance quality plans and 1 assurance quality plan extension and 3 safety case and readiness reports. We continue to add that rigour to the work that's happening across Digital Health and Care Wales from an information assurance perspective and looking at what the implications are for the information perspective. All milestones, and I have to apologise because I did notice some errors in the dates. I think we were a year behind in terms of what we've reported, but that should read as 25-26. So we did deliver all milestones that were planned in the last quarter of 25-26. And the team have also done quite a bit of work on developing some automated alerts on behalf of the Manage My Milestones app. So in addition to the milestones that we're responsible for in terms of delivery and ownership, we also contribute across the clinical directorate in terms of the resources that we provide to support ongoing delivery of plans across DHEW, and the team get automated alerts to ensure that any changes to any milestones, we're notified of that, we're on the ball. We connect with those teams to ensure that we can support delivery across the organisation as well. So good progress in more areas, but also the important support role that we play in terms of delivery of all milestones across DHCW. I've spoken at length in previous committees about the work of the Corporate Power BI team, and we do an awful lot in terms of the assurance side of things. So there's 84 assurance approval requests that have been submitted and processed by the team, just to ensure, again, that there's rigour in terms of all Power BI products that are published outside of our team. So there's the information assurance Corporate Power BI policy that we've distributed, and everyone who's got a license has got to sign up to say that they're complying with that. And we also do lots of ongoing audits just to ensure compliance, particularly when there's changes from Microsoft, because sometimes those happen and it can alter the way that our products operate. And we work really closely with the information governance team as well, just to ensure that we've understood that and what the implications are for the information that we publish as a result of those responsibilities that we have. There's an awful lot of examples within the report just to give a flavour of the types of things, the work that we've been involved with and what products have been released. I'm not going to go into that in any kind of detail, but I just wanted to provide assurance to the committee that we on our external facing website, we have a list of all products that we publish, as well as anything that's in development or that's being developed and being maintained. We also report on that on a monthly basis at our management board, the DHEW management board, and we monitor the type of performance, the uses of our products, the types of users who are using our products. We get a feel for what stakeholders, whether it be NHS Wales users, Welsh Government, academia, etc. So we keep an eye on who the stakeholders are who are using our products, what the most used products are in terms of information, and also we keep an eye on the feedback stats from our users as well, and we're very active in that space to push out surveys, etc., and we report on that to management board as well. We also report on the timeliness of responding to bespoke data requests, because whilst we endeavour to publish quite a lot in that space and make sure that we're pushing more data out into that open the statistics space, so there's a lot that's readily available and you don't need to necessarily come to my team. We do get quite bespoke data requests, and we've got some KPIs to ensure that we're dealing with those on a timely basis, so we regularly report on that as well. And that's all I was going to say. Like I said, there's a bit of detail in that report, but everything's published and accessible. So if anybody wanted further detail, you're very welcome to go and have a look at any of our products or the information that we publish about different data services, etc. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Rachel, and thanks for the summary of the report. It's some really important work. I see, David, your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. Thanks, Rachel. Rachel, just wanted to dig into the Kaizen event that you held recently that was listed in the report. We've now got some better clarity around decision making, and we've streamlined the process. I'm keen to understand if that will improve turnaround time, and if so, what are you hoping to see as a result of the improvements you've made after that event?
So exactly to that point, I think that it wasn't just our information services team, but we appreciated what IG colleagues sometimes requests for information were going to that team. Similarly, because we've got the NDR program and we've got, you know, more data is being migrated and being made available within the CDR and NDAP. We appreciate that there was multiple potential, multiple front doors. So we systematically, we came together and we tried to map out what all of those processes looked like, who all of the, you know, the teams were where data requests could be submitted to. And we tried to create one process, and we've got a data governance group where those things are just a data access group, sorry, where those requests are discussed on a weekly basis. So we've just got better oversight of what's coming into who, and that's being responded to in a more timely way, just to make it easier for our stakeholders, but also to ensure that we're all cited and we're all consistent in terms of our governance and the way that we're handling those types of data requests. So I think it should improve the user experience and the timeliness of the requests that we're dealing with.
Okay, just a matter of interest, do we have any SLAs around that?
We have KPIs that we measure in terms of the timeliness of the requests that we're dealing with. So yeah, we do report on some of that.
Okay.
Was that what you meant?
Yes, yeah, I was just wondering if as a result of that we might see those information or data requests being turned around a little bit quicker, and whether we've got a means to measure it. That's what I was trying to get at.
Well, we certainly measure it in terms of the ad hoc data requests, which is what I referred to. So we report that on a monthly basis to management board.
Okay.
So yeah, sorry, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, David. Chris.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Rachel. I was just going to ask about the urgent and emergency care dashboard, Rachel, because I know when that was published, the hits more than doubled, I think, for the month that month. It was very, very, very popular. So have you had feedback, and what has the feedback been on that, if you have?
We've had positive feedback, and we've had obviously, I mean, we were anticipating we'd have a lot more hits because it was around the winter pressures time. So I think where cancer dashboards are regularly the top dashboards that get the most views and the most hits. But the UEC one did take first spot during that winter period, and we did quite a lot of preparatory work in terms of working with stakeholders to make sure that it was fit for purpose. Was there anything else that we could put in place that would support the system during that time? But as you've said, Chris, because I remember it being discussed in management board, there was a really big spike in terms of usage of that particular dashboard, but the feedback was really positive, to be honest. And as I say, we use that as, you know, we qualitative feedback from users of all of our dashboards to understand, are they supporting you in terms of your decision making and how you're managing your service? What other data would be useful to put in that? And we use that iterative feedback to try and develop our dashboards further. So I know the team have been taking some takeaways from that, essentially, but I think it's started to trail off a little bit now. So I think some of the other dashboards have started to overtake in terms of their usage. So we're seeing that the UEC stuff probably trailing off a little bit now, but yeah, in Q4 in particular, it was a very big spike in terms of the usage of that particular product.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Rachel. And if I may, Rachel, just ask a question before we move on. After 25 or so years in the public sector, I'm very familiar with a very large amount of data sloshing around in public sector organizations, but we are information services, and there is clearly a jump between data and information. I well remember in my first contact with an English local authority, a large county council, they had 449 KPIs, and I was trying to understand how, I was sort of asking them, if you were a pilot of an airplane and you had 449 dials in front of you, you know, which are the ones you really need to go to. And I just wonder to what extent we really do take data in the work that you do and that we do, you know, within the HCW, and turn that into information for decision making, as opposed to simply be masters of data. And I say that in a fairly naive way, because I know that latter characteristic or characterization is not what we do, but I just wonder if you can unpack that a little.
Yeah, and it's a really good observation, and a lot of my team would thank you for the observation, because a lot of what I report and a lot of what we talk about is obviously the information products and the outputs in that space. But what's perhaps less visible is the what you're referring to, like the data linkage, the data curation. So we also manage the national data warehouse and data acquisition function. We bring in enormous amounts of data into that space that we do have to do an awful lot before we can put it in any type of workable, you know, insight back to the system. And that comes in, as you'd imagine, from various systems, various times and various forms, and nothing is as clean and as standard as we, you know, you'd expect it to be before it becomes that nice end product that people are using, and hopefully that insight's helping the system in a multitude of ways. So the data curation, data acquisition, data warehousing space is very, very significant. I should also add, though, in terms of the capabilities through NDR, we're modernising a lot of what that looks like, and we're working really closely with NDR colleagues to try and, you know, modernise what the data acquisition functions look like and how we can process that data more efficiently to unlock its true potential. So I think it's a really interesting space to be in. It's quite a bit of work, because it's certainly not a lift and shift of the existing data warehouse and just plonking it in that Google Cloud environment. It's far from that. There's quite a lot of work that needs to happen to unpick that and to make some of these processes repeatable and better for the future. But it's a really exciting space, and I think my team will massively benefit from it, as will other information teams across Wales as well.
Yeah, Rachel, that's really helpful, and it's a really good enthusiastic way of explaining you know, the importance of the two different aspects of that. So thanks very much for taking time to do that. So great. We're going to I'm asking the committee to note the report for assurance. That's the research innovation. So that's the information services assurance report, and we will at that point take a break, and whichever colleague planned the length of each section of this, I'm just going to say brilliantly done, because estimating how long we will take to work through different items, so far so very good indeed. Well done. So we're just about on schedule. We'll take a break and restart at 14:20 at 2:20, when Rachel, you'll pick up again at that stage, I think, with the research, innovation and knowledge management assurance report. So just enough time to get a cup of tea or whatever. I'll see you then. Great. So we'll make a restart, and thanks everybody for getting back on time. That's really helpful. So we're going to make a restart with the another report, I think, from Rachel, and it's you're going to take us through the research, innovation and knowledge management insurance report. Rachel, if you would.
Yes, no problem. Welcome back. So I'll just get started again, just picking out some key highlights from the report. The committee will be well aware we've got an approved research and innovation strategy. So this is the second research and innovation strategy since DHEW was established. And it covers the period for 2026 to 29. So it's the next 3-year look at things. And we're going to be formally launching that. So it's been published, it's been released. I think it has been translated now, actually. It's been translated. But we're going to formally launch that with stakeholders, a hard launch at the 25th of June event, which is a research, innovation and e-library conference. So we had our first e-library conference last year, and we're broadening that to be more inclusive of research and innovation and knowledge management as well. So lots of work's currently happening with the team to put the final details to that agenda, but we've started engaging with with stakeholders to invite them along. It's shaping up to be a really good event. So looking forward to launching the research and innovation strategy there. The focus since February to date on the research and innovation side of things has been very much on, and it correlates with what I was saying around the information assurances work as well. It's been on strengthening assurance around research governance, data access pathways, which links back to the Kaizen event, audit readiness, and the R&I front door. So again, we appreciate that we're part of an organisation where there's lots of correlation and opportunities for us to streamline things. We've really been focusing in on that, but also in the research specific elements, how we can reduce some of the timelines in terms of projects coming to us and some of the governance approvals and things happening. We want the experience of where stakeholders to be as seamless as possible, and if we can be more efficient as part of that, that's what we're striving to achieve. We've also approved the NHS Wales e-library plan, which correlates to that broader strategy for 26-27. And again, the focus of that plan for the next year is around setting clear direction for governance, stewardship and accessibility of digital knowledge and evidence resources across NHS Wales. And the team continues to lead quite an ambitious portfolio of work on behalf of e-libraries across NHS Wales and social care. We make significant progress in the open access publishing work, and I think we've reported to the committee previously. We've done a listening and learning slot at the Digidol SHA board previously around some of the work that we'd instigated in that space. And the purpose is to really enhance the transparency and accountability for research outputs that are DHCW authored or co-authored. So we want to put, some of the really good learning and evidence base out there and make sure that that knowledge is being utilised and that it's accessible across the system. We've also published the findings of the NHS Wales Open Access Feasibility Study. So whilst we continue to make significant progress in the DHCW Open Access Repository, we've appreciated where system leadership role across NHS Wales and the e-library space in particular, and how we can support more NHS Wales authored works to become open access and more readily accessible. And unfortunately, some of the findings from that study were quite stark. So I think less than half of all NHS Wales authored publications are accessible in open access. So there's a real issue there in terms of things being made available and that learning disseminating across the system. So it's something we're trying to tackle with our library service colleagues across Wales, but it's a piece of work we'd like to push forward. But the study results from that are really interesting, and again, we're going to be discussing that in a bit more detail at our conference on the 25th of June. Some key things I did want to mention in the report that I highlighted. The team also, we undertook, or we commissioned the BSI to undertake a gap analysis kite mark accreditation audit on my behalf, looking specifically at ISO 56001 innovation management. So earlier in the year, myself and two of my colleagues from the research and innovation team, we undertook the professional qualification for ISO 56001, and we wanted to explore what it would look like for the organisation, for DHCW to acquire that a kite mark accreditation. We know that there's some areas we're particularly strong in, but we thought there might be some areas we'd want to really understand where we fare in terms of compliance with that standard, with the kite mark accreditation. So the auditors were working with us in April, and we've got the report was recently sent to us in terms of where we fare. So it's a fairly informal report, but it does give us an idea of the level of work and some areas where we might want to progress before we go for that kite mark accreditation. So we'll be bringing something to management board to discuss the options and potential recommendations coming out of that, and the work that's going to create for the team to really ensure that we're aligning ourselves as far as possible towards that kite mark accreditation. We continue to do quite a lot of work in respect of the Digital Economy Act accreditation. We've been working really closely with our quality assurance and regulatory compliance colleagues in terms of using our iPassport system to try and bring our evidence more into that space to support the ongoing annual accreditation audits. And next year in 2027, we'll have a full review again, and it'll be one of the big thorough reviews as opposed to the annual checks that we currently undergo. So we need to make sure that we're prepared for that, and we've got everything lined up and making it as seamless as possible. But yeah, getting really good support from our quality assurance colleagues to support us in terms of the evidence generating and recording of that, and keeping it stored appropriately in our iPassport system. We've also been doing quite a bit of work with EBSCO, working on their new interface, which is due to be released in June. So EBSCO's basically provider of information and library databases, and yeah, we're working with EBSCO, our supplier, and also eLibrary colleagues to really get prepared and to try and inform some of the work that they're doing, so that the tool's really accessible and usable for our colleagues out in the service. So we've been leading a bit of that work. Similarly, Library Lincoln tool, we've been doing quite a bit of work and that's now live as of May. But again, doing quite a lot of work since the completion of the procurement to really work out, how that interfaces. So it's a citation and reference linking tool. So users using that tool will be able to link to the full text documents. And we've had to do quite a bit to try and ensure that it's integrated into all of our eLibrary resources. So the team's been doing an awful lot of work with that, but it did go live in May. So hopefully the feedback from stakeholders is positive, but we work really closely we've got a library champions group, and I chair the eLibrary National Service Board as well. So any issues with regards to that gets fed back, but fingers crossed everything's positive to date. I just wanted to end, I think there's a section in the report where we just wanted to make sure the committee was aware that we did have an organisational change process in plan for this period. We were hoping to have it completed by the 1st of August, and the rationale behind that was bringing together the research and innovation and eLibrary teams under one structure to ensure that we've got that continuity of service, that we're really maximising capacity and capabilities and resilience across the research, innovation, knowledge management, and also eLibrary resources that we have across those teams. And as I say, that nice continuity of service and complementary skills from those teams coming together. And we have had to pause that because of the current situation with regards to recruitment freezes, etc. But we've done quite a lot of work with the teams, and the teams are very well informed. They're very well appraised of what's going on, and we've done quite a lot of reviewing our plans to say, well, where do we need to reprioritise things, and what should be our focus in terms of critical activities, etc. So I think we've remedied what we can in this period, and we've also been doing quite a lot to try and extend temporary contracts and stuff, so that we've got that continuity of service, and disruptions minimal essentially. But we hope to pick up the OCP at some point in the future where possible, and just wanted the committee to be aware of that activity essentially. But that's it from me. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Well, Rachel, that's a really good gallop through the report. Thanks very much indeed. And I see David, your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. Thanks, Rachel. Rachel, firstly, I just wanted to comment on, I really like the outcomes and benefits in practice sections that we've now added to the report. I find that really useful. So thank you for that. And the organisational change process, you just touched on that a little bit. Yeah. I think I know the answer, but I'll ask the question anyway, just to make sure. So have you it sounds like you've paused that because of the recruitment freeze. Yeah. But it sounded like you were sort of reorganising the team. And is it in the reorganisation, were you planning to bring new people in and that's why we've had to pause it? Or is it you've got staff on fixed term contracts and that's complicated by this? Just unpack that a little bit for me in terms of. Yeah, of course.
So we were proposing to create some new roles by bringing those structures together to streamline some of the management arrangements, whereas we have two very distinct teams. We were hoping to bring those together under one management structure, which would create some new roles and I guess some opportunities within the team, but we'd have to go through that fair process. And as a result of not being able to progress that as is, we've had to extend some temporary contracts within the team. And there would be some new roles that we just simply can't recruit to, and some things, particularly in the kite mark accreditation space. I'm a little bit disappointed because I would have really liked to have done a lot more and had some quite ambitious plans for how we could strengthen our capabilities in that space. But that's not to say we're not doing anything, and we've got quite a plan B that we're proposing to take forward. So I think there's some things we're just going to have to realistically look at what the committed and critical work is that we're going to that we can and what we will support, and then some things we might just have to pause slightly. But we've put some remedial arrangements in place, and I think that's probably the right thing to do at this point.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
No problem.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Just connected to that, I was going to ask just in the same area, and then I'll come to Marilyn. And without trying to go down a rabbit hole that I don't know enough about, Rachel, so it's genuinely asked more out of naivety than anything else. It sounded to me from your description that this was less about expansion and more about consolidation of bringing together into one area the different streams of research and innovation for all the reasons that you've set out. So, you know, again, I'm not challenging what clearly has been thought through. I am just trying to understand whether we need to actually pause on that consolidation work, as opposed to we can't do that until we are able to recruit to new roles. Because, as I said, if it's not about expansion and it's more about consolidation, I didn't want to go away from this bit of the conversation slightly unconvinced about our ability to still move forward in that, because it does sound like a goal well worth achieving.
It is complex, because I think in some, there would be the consolidation of some roles within the team, and then there would be the creation of, there would be some changes. It's not just about bringing roles together. And I think the way it would work is if we started at the top and we changed some things that would have an impact on other roles. So I think we'd have to do it in its totality. We couldn't just do one or two roles at a time. So I think, unfortunately, we're just pausing it for the current period, but we will look at it, and we will revisit it, and we haven't lost our ambition in that space, because it does actually create some resilience, some much needed resilience. I mean, the research and innovation team, as is, we have 2 posts, so we're beg, borrowing and stealing resource from across the organ. And I'm fortunate that I'm responsible for a much larger portfolio, so I've been able to see those opportunities in terms of how we can consolidate and utilize skills and create that resilience, but also what I think is an interesting opportunity in terms of building that knowledge management space as well, which we haven't really had previously, and we've started doing so much good work in that area. So I think it's exciting, but I think at the minute we can't take it forward. And yes, there's some consolidation, but there's also some new propositions, etc. So okay,
Rachel, thank you. That's a good explanation. And Marilyn, before we move to the next item on the agenda.
Marilyn Brown-Jones, independent board member. I just want to thank you for a really comprehensive report. I was just going to say, for perhaps people outside the organisation, for you to just encapsulate the enormity of just, for instance, the e-library work that you've done, because, as speaking to colleagues, I know that it's quite a huge undertaking, and I think perhaps people outside might not recognise, and now you're bringing into the, you know, utilising the strengths that we've got and bringing it all into the same space, how much difference that's going to make organisationally. So I just wondered if you could just expand a little bit more on that so people can appreciate, you know, the complexity of it, and how much really you've done within that space. Like you've said, you've only got 2 posts. I mean, so what you've done has been absolutely phenomenal. So I just wanted to sort of give you an opportunity to sort of just round that up really. And
And
Having
again,
said that,
thank you for the
Rachel, I'm going to
question.
ask you just to curtail the enthusiasm a bit, because you know, take a minute to do it, but we're going to have to move on to the agenda as well.
Okay.
No problem. So the thank you for the opportunity. The e-library service. So we manage all of the national procurement of e-library resources on behalf of NHS Wales and social care. And that is enormous, because historically each service and each health board would go away and do that themselves. So by us consolidating that, and we work really closely with our stakeholders across the system to understand need, to understand usage, etc. We lead on that procurement activity on their behalf. The e-library team is slightly larger than the research and innovation team, just to correct that point. And it's led by a fantastic team. I can't take credit for the work that happens, and the team are consistently driving the ambition and the strategy in that space. For example, leading on the open access work, which is something that the 4 nations are looking to come together and really use Wales as the lead in that space. That's one example. But yeah, we've got a really good team in that space, and I think it was the right thing to do to consolidate the activity of that team under DHCW, the procurement activity.
Great, thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Marilyn, for the opportunity for Rachel to explain that. So thanks very much for the questions and the points raised, and the report itself. Diolch for that, Rachel. And the committee is being asked to note for assurance the Research, Innovation and Knowledge Management Assurance Report, which we do, and move on to 4.5, which is the Wales Informatics Assurance Group Report. And welcome Jamie Manning, the Quality Manager for Regulatory Compliance, to the meeting. Welcome. And Jamie, I'm going to ask you just to pick out the key points of this report, please. Ms. Gwalchan.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair and members. So my name is Jamie Manning. I'm the Regulatory Compliance Manager in DHCW, and I'm going to talk through the Wales Informatics Assurance Group, or WIAG report. So as usual, the primary purpose of this report is to provide the committee with formal assurance that digital services developed or procured by Digital Health and Care Wales has been proportionally and appropriately assured. The overall WIAG position, I'm pleased to report that there are no key risks or matters requiring escalation to the committee this quarter. An assurance activity during this quarter or reporting period has remained stable, with the governance processes continuing to support safe development across a range of national digital programs. The Go Live assurance activity during this quarter, so WIAG supported Go Live assurance approval across several significant programs. These include 2 lots of EPS, the electronic prescribing service, Nominate Pharmacy, National Eye Care, dental access portal enhancements, amongst others that are contained in the report. But all projects listed within the report have received the appropriate WIAG and medical director approvals prior to deployment. There were no new assurance quality plans or safety case and readiness reports submitted this quarter, but that's reflective of the continued transition from the legacy AQP and safety case and readiness reports process towards the Power app-enabled assurance model, which is now the primary mechanism for WIAG submissions. And I believe the only remaining project continuing through the legacy pathway is the LIMS, so it's the TCLE, the TrackCare Lab Enterprise System. Current assurance pipeline is supporting assurance activity across 24 active projects at the moment through the Power App process. These programs span national infrastructure, cloud migration, prescribing, diagnostics, patient-facing services, and digital clinical workflows. Again, these include things like WNCR, the Welsh Nursing Care Record, MPI modernisation, PROMS integration. But this does demonstrate both the scale and growing maturity, I feel, of the assurance engagement across DHCW, which is great. But that brings me on to the improvement side, because a significant focus this quarter has been on looking on how to improve how WIAG assurance activity integrates into the delivery lifecycle in DHCW. So the objective is to move assurance further upstream into program delivery and enabling self-assessment. So essentially what we want to do is, as soon as a work package is approved and assigned outside of WIAG, it can be self-assessed if it needs to go to WIAG, if it needs WIAG approval or not. And if so, the assessment will then ask the owner to score against each of the assurance areas for risk and impact, and dependent on the category chosen against the assurance area, the correspondent assurance requirements from all assurance areas will be visible to the work package owner. So the improvement work specifically addresses that point. Assurance is being aligned earlier in the delivery workflows through a clearer definition of ready approach, and we're trying to cut through all the ambiguity and enabling issues to be identified much earlier in the life cycle. And then what we're looking to do is the WIAG meetings will then be altered so that the assurance leads will then ratify or verify the self-assessment. So we can't just let them go at this point in time to verify their own assurance activities, but they can have that up front. So what this means theoretically, because WIAG operates twice a month, that in a 2-week period from a work package being approved and assigned, we can get up to, we believe, and this is what we're trialing, up to 40% of the work completed within those first 2 weeks, right at the beginning. And also from what was escalated last month, this has also been driven to ensure that all work packages are assessed for requiring WIAG approval. So off the back of that, the completed activities for this improvement so far, we've run Kaizen events, stakeholder workshops, we've looked at the product functions, developed an integrated process flow, and implemented a risk-mapped assurance requirements across all 20 work streams. That was a massive piece of work to get the 20 assurances to come together and define what requirements they need, and then also get them to define those against a scalable matrix of, is it low impact, high, and so on and so forth. And at the moment, in parallel, the work remains to continue to develop the self-assessment dashboard. We're defining additional KPIs for reporting capabilities that we feel that we can pull out of this. And we're actually piloting the testing of this kind of refined operating model. So far, we've held 2 pilots, and we've made sure that we've got people from project management, the assurance leads, and all stakeholders in that trial to ensure that we can iron out any issues and make it as intuitive and straightforward as possible. So from an assurance perspective, the overall position remains positive. The current assurance model is supporting safe development, whilst also evolving toward a more proportionate risk impact based delivery integrated approach. And this will the aim of this is to help WIAG operate not as simply as a governance checkpoint, but increasingly as an embedded assurance partner within program delivery. And I believe that brings me to the end of the report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you,
Laura.
Jamie. That's a big part. I think, Laura, you were trying to come in on the back of that.
Thanks, Alistair. Diolch. It was just a quick question around WIAG, and obviously it takes into consideration assurance around a number of areas such as IG, language, and things like that. And I was just wondering, obviously with the increased use of AI tools, that whether WIAG will be expanded to get AI assurance on whether if we're building that into our products and things like that. Jamie. Deal.
That is definitely on our roadmap. We can't ignore it. We have brought it up in the WIAG group to say that this will be heading our way, and we need to start to define now what it is that we need to arm our assurance leads with so that they can give that assurance, but also doing a gap analysis of what people need so we can send people on training, whatever it is they need to ensure that WIAG can assure AI. Obviously, there's another AI steering group that's in charge of, creating our approach, our policy, all the ethics and guidelines behind it. That'll all be pulled into the WIAG space as well. So we do see it there. But at this moment in time, it's kind of undefined. There are conversations with Ridian to try and tease that out, what that looks like and how we build that in.
If I can come back, Chair, on
Please,
that.
Laura.
Yeah, Diolch. I think it'd probably be worth taking a look at that as a committee then, if it's work in progress. Obviously, you know, it's a fast moving piece of area of technology, Jamie, and I think it's
Yeah.
really important from an organisational and a committee's perspective that we get assurance on that through the WIAG. So if we're happy to work with you in terms of timing and planning it for a committee deep dive, but we'll take that offline if that's okay with you, Chair, but pencil it in for the forward work plan. Diolch.
Yeah,
That's really
no problem.
helpful, Laura. Thanks for that, Dioch. And it does, I think, bring to mind that in pretty well every report we're looking at today, in some cases we've asked about the implications of AI. In others, they've been simply there, but not necessarily talked about. And it's just to ensure that the AI steering group is feeding all these different aspects of AI monitoring and effective planning for AI is feeding through to the steering group, and that we have sight of potentially what comes out of that, Laura, not simply from one particular area, important as it is, because it's how, you know, we actually deal with AI as a whole organization. I think that's going to be very important. So quite how we link that into the forward plan, I leave to you to look at. But I think there are implications for AI, obviously, right across the board. David, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. Jamie, thanks for the update. I just wanted to say well done on getting the self-assessment tool off the ground and the potential for embedding that in how we do business rather than as an add-on. You said in the report it's in development. Have you got a timeline on when it will be sort of more widely deployed in the organisation?
So we're looking at summertime. We're working with a third party to develop this. I believe they are contracted to be with us at the end of this month. So what that'll leave us with is a working model, which we have. So next steps from that would be taking it to Ridian, getting Ridian's approval, and then it will be trying to integrate it as a solid piece. The issue is it's very complex because the process that I just described is WIAG, but it isn't WIAG, the central core part of WIAG. What I was very aware that we can do whatever we can to WIAG, but because there are so many feeds, because of where it sits, we need to look outside of it and develop that pathway in an intuitive way, you know, hitting all the markers for regulatory things that we need, but not inflate it. Not overinflate or underinflate, and that's where this proportionality comes in, and that scalability comes in. But it needs to be embedded from the beginning, almost outside of WIAG, so that the majority of work is being done in action. So by the time they get to WIAG, they've got their full list of requirements, everything they need, as early as they possibly can.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I look forward to seeing that in anger sometime later in the year. Then.
Thanks, David. And just a quick couple of things, Jamie. I wish you well with the terminology self-assessment. The associations with annual income tax might just diminish the amount of buy-in we get, but I'm sure that will work. It was the issue of Kaizans being used, which I very strongly support. It's the second report in which Kaizans have featured, and I just wondered more generally, it might be something for Chris or for Laura to respond to, whether Kaizans themselves as part of continuous improvement are being asked to be included within all parts of our organization, or are they simply being picked up by individual work streams within our organization?
Jamie, do you want to respond from a quality improvement perspective, and I'll supplement if needed?
Yeah, not a problem. So Kaizen was born from the Quality Assurance and Regulatory Department from my boss, Paul Evans. And what we did is we ran it first on WIAG with the group of people just to demonstrate what it is, why it is, and how it can work. And simply from that, there seems to be quite a large appetite, actually, because although you've seen it quoted in 2 reports, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris and Laura, there's been 4 or 5 Kaizen events run so far. And as they're being run, we are getting more and more interest in facilitating these Kaizen events, and currently the QA and RC department are facilitating these on behalf of the departments, but the next steps are to train other people so that they don't have to wait for QA and RC to facilitate these kind of events. You know, they can run them at will when they feel the need. And we've also got quality business partners. So we've got a member of our team that sits as a business partner with each of the directorates. So that's another way that we can feed through as well, that during our time reporting on certain metrics, we can open it up to say, we're here, we're quality. Is there anything that you want from us? Anything you want us to facilitate or talk through or help with?
That's really helpful, Jamie. Thanks. Chris, did you want to add anything to that in terms of the corporate wide?
Yeah, we've gone after the big issue areas. I think that we've identified where process improvement could help. So in major incidents or YAG recruitment processes are 3 areas that I think there are a lot of pain points across the organization. So bringing different parts of the organization to go through a Kaizen event has really added value. I think it's probably worth saying, I think if Paul was here, would probably say the capacity within the team is limited. And so I think Jamie's point around training, rolling out training across the organization so it's more sustainable is probably important if we want to keep using the approach and methodology more widely. But yeah, it's focused on some big areas at the moment.
Great, that's really, really helpful to know. It just seems like it's a very positive burgeoning area, and I'm very supportive of it, but thank you. And Jamie, thank you for the report itself. And I'm going to ask the committee to note the report for assurance, and we will move on to 4.6, which is the Technical Design Authority Assurance Report. And Sam Lloyd, Executive Director of Operations, you're going to, I think, take us through the key points from this, Sam.
Thanks, Alistair. I'm actually going to hand over to Chris Collis, who's our Chief Product and Technology Officer, who's just joined to present this item. So, Chris, over to you. Thank you.
And Chris, welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Sam. Thanks, Chair. So this paper is for noting. So it's providing the committee an update on the work of the HCW's Technical Design Authority, or TDA, which is a key part of our governance and architectural oversight across the whole organisation. And just for those who may not be familiar, the TDA sets and maintains our architectural direction. So that includes things like architectural principles, standards and patterns for the organisations, for our product teams and other teams across the organisation to follow. And it works alongside another forum called the Technical Design Assurance Group, or TDAG, and that carries out the detailed technical assurances. So to make sure that decisions teams are making, or the designs of the products or the architectures they're proposing, conform to the standards that we've set out, basically. And the TDAG reports into our TDA. So it's basically making sure that we're aligned with strategic direction of the organisation. So I did report here at the previous meeting, which I think was in February, and since then the TDA has met once. That was in April, middle of April. And there's just a few messages that I want to get across. So this is mostly just for updates and noting. So first, we've actually agreed a more structured approach to how we manage technical debt. So we're asking our product teams to review debt within their own services. We're going to be prioritising particular product areas to come back with a report on any debt that I've identified. So I think up until this point, we've been more reliant on the TDAG, that assurance group, flagging where particular decisions or designs haven't aligned with the principles and marking that as a technical debt. But what we recognise is that there's, we've only recently, on relatively speaking scale, agreed some of the updated principles that we're working to. So there's going to be products and services that previously won't have adhered to those. So it'd be good to understand what that gap is in terms of reaching an alignment, and whether it's appropriate or necessary to do so. Obviously, we need some data and intelligence to be able to do it. So that's on technical debt. Second, we're continuing to clarify, and I reference what Jamie was just saying about YAG. We're also looking within TDA and TDAG how all the different assurance forums fit together, and very much this shift left that's mentioned frequently about trying to do assurances earlier in the life cycle of products, making sure the principles and standards are adhered to within the very early design thinking of products and services. So we're looking at all those different aspects so that the architecture assurance sits squarely in the wider governance model that exists. And we'll be looking very carefully at how WIAG are making some of those changes. I think that's well aligned with some of the changes we made last year to our assurance, which brings me on to the third point, which is about something we introduced last year. It was a process called Architecture Decision Records, or ADRs as they're known. And this was an updated method we put in place for decision making. And it was all about capturing key architectural decisions that perhaps in the past have been made and maybe logged in someone's head but haven't necessarily been written down, capturing them, but also then empowering teams to be able to make those decisions as expert communities. So we set out the rules to say how many different people need to be involved in a particular decision, at what level they need to bring it to in the organization. But again, it's more about empowering them to assess all of the options and make the decision and then bring the outcome back to our governance, rather than coming to the governance forum and asking for a decision or an approval. So team empowerment, and that's been working really well actually, and we discussed that at the last TDA. Teams are really engaging with it. We're getting greater visibility of decisions that are made. So like I said, where before perhaps decisions were made but we couldn't see them, we're now actually surfacing them. And teams are also using it as a great way to get more peer reviews, which I think in the past hasn't happened as readily. So yeah, just to note that's going well. We also, so fourth point, we've generated a solution architecture strategy. So again, part of TDA's remit, we're looking at the different sort of standards and approaches. That was an overview was given at the last TDA. The full strategy's going to be circulated this week for an approval at the next TDA, and that will again set out some more standardized approaches that we say if teams follow the approaches in there, they don't necessarily need to seek any kind of formal approval because it's already aligned with the TDA's agreed standards. And a number of the elements in that strategy are about making sure our products and services are more portable and less dependent on a single cloud provider. So just make sure that we have flexibility in the future, whether that's financial or infrastructure based. And it's using industry standard techniques and approaches as you'd expect. And then finally, I want to call out the progress at the national level with the architecture principles. So we developed a series of architecture principles, both a high-level governing set and then different domains, like there was cybersecurity principles, infrastructure principles, software development principles. We've got a whole suite of them. They're published on our architecture site. That's publicly accessible, so anyone can go and see those. Those were endorsed by for use in wider NHS Wales by the National Standards and Architecture Group that recently formed. So I think the first meeting of that was actually in February this year, the formal first meeting, and the principles that DHCW had worked on were presented there. They've been through a number of sessions actually with the wider architecture community across NHS Wales prior to that. So there's been a few minor tweaks to some of the wordings just to make them land more succinctly with all the organisations involved. So the minor amended versions came back to the TDA. We had a quick overview of those. I think we were fairly comfortable with the tweaks to the wording. So they're now in circulation with our TDA members, and we're expecting to sign those off at the next TDA session, which I think's towards the end of this month, at which point DHCW will be aligned with the national principles for architecture, and we're expecting other organisations in NHS Wales to do the same thing. So hopefully we're leading by example through that alignment, and that's great because then it means that across all the different organisations, the health boards and the authorities will all be working to the same principles around architecture. So that will help with conversations about how we deploy services, how we secure them, and what standards and approaches we should be taking. So overall, I guess in summary, we're moving towards greater consistency, clearer governance, better reusable approved patterns, and a stronger national alignment. So that should help with duplication, portability or flexibility of our services, and that will feed into longer term decision making for us, is my expectation. No specific risks for escalation in here, just the dependencies. I think I mentioned the same dependencies actually last time, which is just around making sure we dedicate enough architectural capacity to work on the things that we commission within the TDA, because I think they're important, and then making sure we maintain that clear alignment with the national structures and the standard architecture boards to make sure that we're all aligned across NHS Wales. So any questions?
Okay, Chris, thank you for that. We're getting pretty close to being out of time on this particular issue for too many questions. But David, if you've got a quick one.
I have. Well, it was the first. Well done on getting the standards that TDA had produced adopted at a national level. That's great to hear. The last worry I had was comment about resources. We've mentioned a few times before about doing this on a sort of on top of the day job, really. Are you happy that we've got sufficient resource in this area, given some of the constraints that we're working within at the moment?
And it's not very often, Chris, that we ask people their state of happiness. So this is a lot on your shoulders here.
I think I would say across a number of teams who obviously would always benefit from having additional capacity. And I think I said this last time when talking to Mark, we're always looking for additional cyber capacity as well, because it's a growing area. It's the same in architecture. I think it's a really key aspect and really important for the national architecture. So if anyone was offering additional capacity or roles, I'd be biting their hand off for it. But we work within the means that we've got, I would say, and that's where prioritization is important.
It's
and I fully
yeah.
recognise and appreciate the constraints we're working under. But yeah, if you've got some architects hiding away in your boardroom, then please send them over.
Go on, David. Just unleash a few of those architects. And Chris, you're a loss to the diplomatic corps. Very, very neatly handled that one. But Luke, thank you very much. It was a really thorough summary of the report. Really appreciate it, Chris. Thanks very much for taking us through it. And just noting for the committee that the report is there to note for assurance, and that's the Technical Design Authority Assurance Report. So thanks again, Dioch, Chris, for that, and Sam. And we'll move on and welcome Vicky Saunders to the meeting. And this is really for a verbal update, Vicky, on AI principles. AI, unsurprisingly, has come up a few times during the course of the last hour or two, and I'm sure it's very much top of many people's minds. But actually, how we engage with it is extremely interesting to us. So, can I hand over to you just for a quick verbal update on this, please? Mindful of we'll be pulling the meeting to closing matters in 10 minutes.
Right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to provide any sort of update, have a discussion about AI. I would note that our AI strategy was approved by the SHA board in April. So we do now have an AI strategy, which does incorporate the principles I think that you are referring to. So I can just share a slide. So this is the strategy which has been approved already. Let me just skip along. And the principles form part of it. So these are the principles here. The thing, I guess, about the principles is there's 10 of them. They were widely consulted across the NHS and with partners in Welsh Government, so that there's a good deal of comfort with these principles that we have. They align with international best practice, so with UK, OECD and EU frameworks. One thing that we have done a little differently to those other jurisdictions is we have called out specifically sustainability and accessibility. And we have, two separate principles relating to those areas. And for us, that's really important. And I think for me, in all strategies, you have to look at global best practice, but then you also have to think about the local priorities and how they may impact on what it is that you're doing. So these are the 10 principles that we aligned on and that everybody bought into, covering the three main themes of people and fairness, trust and safety, and governance and sustainability. So those are the principles, and they've been adopted, as I said. Where we're up to now with the AI work, we have the strategy, we're looking to implement it. In the first instance, that's really about standing up a governance framework so that we have a simple and repeatable assurance function for any AI tools that we're looking to introduce. And that's something that we are working through, and hopefully we'll be able to come to SHA board by July with that governance framework. It will include an AI register so that we will have a complete list of, what AI is going on, where, what it involves, what the risks may be with it, how those risks are being mitigated, etc., etc. So that's really the focus of myself and the AI steering group at the moment, is to get a handle on that governance process. So I'm very happy to take any questions. I'm not quite sure what the particular interests are of this group of people, but fire away and I'll do my best to answer.
Oh my goodness, you've laid yourself open there, Vicky, the interests of this group of people. And may I just ask, AI, and you've just made reference to risks, which are absolutely appropriate. I think it's top of many of our minds. And without sounding like a worn-out record, they also represents opportunities, which you didn't refer to. And I'm sure that's not because it's not in our minds, but we are part of an environment which is risk averse, as opposed to more generally looking for opportunities, describing the wider NHS, and it's understandable why that would be so. But I'm hoping that the strategy will also encompass a definition of some of the key opportunities that can help us to do many different things, transform the way we deliver and transform also the way we are organized. So I'm hoping that you would be including that in it. But it's more just for a comment there, Vicky, but I'm going to ask David for the question or comment that you may have, David.
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. Thanks, Vicky. Just out of interest, have we looked at the use of Claude, the code generation AI app, internally for those areas of business where we do need to develop some software? Is that something that we're looking at or actually using in anger anyway?
Yeah, there are people in the organisation using Claude in different ways. Sam is probably going to be able to give a more comprehensive answer. So maybe, Sam, were you coming in to comment on that, or did you have a question?
Yes. Yeah, no, I was going to comment on that. So we are, David, absolutely. We've evaluated a number of AI code generation tools, including GitHub and Claude and others. So we haven't fully concluded that exercise yet, but it's absolutely something that we're looking at. And there's a strategic session that's planned in a couple of weeks, actually, with the exec directors to discuss the progress that we've made with some of that and to think about what some of the implications might be for the wider organisation.
Okay, great, thanks.
And Alistair, if I may just come back
Please,
on your other point about opportunities, I'm absolutely front of mind, and in designing the governance framework, very mindful of not unduly standing in the way of an area that, it's just moving so rapidly, and those opportunities are growing all the time. But we do also need to manage risk, and I think particularly in the health and care space, it's really important that we do a full assessment of the impacts, that good and bad, and the risks, and understand how we can mitigate the risks. And if we can't mitigate them, then we need to be very much aware of them and to understand how we're going to manage them. And so that is the focus of the governance framework, but it is very much being designed with a view of being as light touch as possible while providing the assurance that we need. And so I'm hope to be able to give the board an update on that by July. We're moving as quickly as we possibly can with that.
Thank you, Vicky. That's really, really good to hear and really reassuring. And the slide you had up for a brief moment looked right. It was quite a quick, rapid run through, and obviously we're going to spend a lot more time in this and we are spending a lot more time in this as an organisation in many different aspects of our work. But it's good to have it pulled together here, and that you'll be in a better position after July to update us as well as other parts of the organisation. So thank you. And really just the committee, I'm asking to note the AI principles in this verbal debate, and I think we have done that, and we will, I'm sure, have many more occasions where we can move into this and discuss it for a longer period. But thank you in the meantime, Vicky, much appreciated. And so I'm going to move on to part 5 of our agenda, which is closing matters. And just on 5.1, some items for the highlight report to the board, which I can potentially pick this up with Chris and Laura at a later stage. But there are 1 or 2 areas that are probably worth highlighting. 3.2, the corporate risk register, the opportunities that the data flow can present, not just risks. We identified that the CANISC risk has been mitigated significantly, and that can be probably reviewed, but advised by Ridian. 4.1, the incident review and organizational learning report. There was, I think, an important aspect of describing the shared learning, not just learning, and what we're doing about that. It was important to note the reduction in the number of incidents, which is also very helpful. The potential for mutual learning with other parts of the United Kingdom. On 4.2, the Information Governance Assurance Report, we noted increased FOI requests and AI impact on IG and cyber security. 4.3, we noted Information Services Assurance Report delivered all milestones. It was slightly unclear, but we can pick that up because actually in the report I think it described as 95%. But I think that's simply my misreading of it. I noted the all milestones being cleared, but we can pick that up for clarity to the board. 4.4, research, innovation, and knowledge. Yep. So we noted the key risks that were observed in the organizational change process, and why that might be worth highlighting is not just of itself, but it appears in the report to identify the potential to be something of a blocker of other developments and delivery of other parts of our strategy. So it's certainly worth noting. And in 4.5, Wales Informatics, it was, I think, very notable that there were no key risks this quarter across the national programme. Sometimes it's worth noting when there is nothing to report as much as when there is something to report, and I think that's one of them. Yeah, so there were, with the AI strategy, we noted in 4.7 the importance of standing up a governance framework, and that we are following international good practice with the additional component of sustainability, which sounds absolutely right. But as I say, Chris, I could pick up, just 1 or 2 of these with you in the days ahead. So moving on to 5.2 on our agenda is really to see whether there are any other urgent items or urgent matters of business to raise. I see none, and therefore I'm going to just identify the date of the next meeting, which is Thursday, the 20th of August. And we'll now take a short break of 10 minutes to reconvene. Does that work? 25 past for everybody? For a comfort break, and then we'll start again with the private session. In the meantime, thanks everybody who's been at this meeting for the meeting itself. Thanks again. See you shortly. Bye.